Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Matt here. I hope you're doing well. Today, as you can probably tell based on the array of 1022 parts in front of you, this is going to be a video on a new 1022 build that I'm starting. I think this is going to start a small series of videos for me. The first video here today showing you the parts I'm using as well as the final assembled barreled action. I don't have the chassis I plan to put the rifle in just yet. If you follow the channel, you may remember that I actually won a 1022 chassis from Grey Birch Solutions. It's still currently in I guess the R&D phase, but once they get that into production, they will contact me and I'll hopefully get that without any issues. So that's the chassis that I plan to put this build in, and I think it's going to be pretty neat. But beyond that, for now, I'm going to just stick this in a regular stock for the testing phase while I wait for that chassis to be released. And as I mentioned before, this is just going to show you the barreled action here today. Now I can't actually show you the assembly of the 1022 with the new YouTube rules, but there's already really good content out there, and the 1022 is a pretty straightforward rifle to put together. Of course, I do have a 1022 already. Like, who doesn't? This one is completely stock besides the Hogue stock that I threw on this, but everything else is OEM Ruger parts. And this is one of the first rifles that I ever built, or pardon me, that I ever bought. And it's been a lot of fun, put thousands and thousands of rounds through this. So it's really awesome that the 1022 patent has expired now, because you can easily build a 1022 without any Ruger parts in it, which is pretty neat. There's probably like 1,000 different companies making 1022 compatible parts. I do have a Ruger trigger pack, as you can see here. Now, when I was purchasing these components was just around the time Rick from the Canadian Rimfire Precision Series was announcing the new X22 series of matches that will be running in 2021. Had I known the rule set he was using, I probably would have purchased a few different things, probably a longer barrel as well as a different trigger group, but I'm gonna just see how these work for now and decide whether or not I want to upgrade those things later in the future. But the X22 match, if you haven't heard of it yet, definitely check it out on the CRPS Facebook page or website. It seems like a really interesting series of matches with both long range stuff, bench rest shooting, silhouette shooting, as well as the up close and fast engagement on steel. So it's basically a all-round rifle and shooter competition to see who's the best at everything, which is really cool. So I'm just gonna go ahead now and just walk through the parts that I purchased here for this build and go from there. To get these out of the way first, of course, I bought a few more BX1 magazines. These are just the standard 10-round rotary magazines for the 1022. And I purchased a 3-pack here. I'm gonna throw it on this coupler that holds 3 of these magazines together in kind of like a star formation, which is really cool. Really popular setup. Obviously, I already have 1022 magazines for the 1022 I already have, but I did want a set on that coupler there. This build in general is pretty conservative relative to parts you can find for 1022s out there, but I wanted to keep the cost fairly low for now until I get kind of a handle of what works and what doesn't. So the trigger pack here that I purchased is just the slightly upgraded Ruger BX trigger. It's slightly lighter and more crisp than the factory trigger that comes on the 1022s. Now, there's a lot of different models of 1022s, but this very basic one here will very often come with a trigger that breaks probably around 4.5 to 5 pounds. So it's not ideal for precision shooting, obviously, but if you just want a fun blaster, it's totally fine. And I didn't want to break the bank, so to speak, with a trigger just yet, so I decided to just drop this one in this build for now. So it does come with a little plastic guard on here for now, so you can reset the hammer and feel the trigger without damaging it through dry fire. But what I feel already is that it is a much lighter trigger than the other Ruger trigger, so it's definitely an upgrade, but nowhere near the Volquartsen or Kid triggers that you can get, obviously. Going on to the receiver, this is from Delask Arms. I purchased everything from here to this side from Delask Arms, which is based out in BC, so it's a great place to source 1022 parts here in Canada. This is their in-house receiver, their Tough 22. I decided to go this receiver for a few different reasons. First off, I love just the aesthetics of it, and I like the fact that the pick rail on the top here does extend about 1 inch from where the receiver ends. Now, they do make this in a few different configurations. This one here is just the straight Picatinny rail. They also make one with a 30 and 20 MOA cant built into it. Again, if I had known the complete rule set of the X22 series beforehand, I probably would have picked up the version with the 30 MOA of cant built into the rail, but for now, again, this is going to work completely fine. If I find I do need some extra elevation to help my scope dial in those longer shots, I might perhaps pick up a pair of those Burris XTR rings or just build another 1022. So of course, another very important part of the build is the barrel. This is another Delask product. This is their 12.5-inch heavy profile. I believe it's stainless barrel. I'll have to double check that actually, I don't remember. But it's in their matte finish, and again, 12.5 inches, 1 16-inch twist. And it does have their sporter chamber, so it can shoot anything, including the cheaper bulk ammo and whatnot. I believe their match chamber cannot shoot CCI, but this one has their sporter chamber in that. And again, it is a heavy profile with a threaded muzzle, 1/2 inch by 28 TPI. Bolt handle or charging handle that I purchased is also a Delask product, and it's their extended charging handle, which I think looks really nice. There's some nice kind of like grenade style knurling on that. And this also does come with a guide rod, and it also does come with 3 different weight springs, so you can kind of tune the recoil of your bolt assembly depending on what ammunition you're shooting. So it comes with a light spring for your subsonic or standard velocity ammunition, a heavy spring for your hyper velocity stuff, and your regular weight spring for your high velocity things. I'll probably be running the lightweight spring because I plan to shoot mostly CCI standard velocity through this. I also picked up one of the Delask V blocks. This is a extended magazine release. Now this one here is their short version. They make a short and a long. The short one here will end a little bit further up on the trigger guard, whereas the long one comes all the way back. Let me show you here. If I just open this up. So installed, this extended magazine release you can see will sit right about there on the trigger guard, whereas the long one will come all the way back. Now the issue with the long one that comes all the way back to the rear of this trigger guard is that sometimes it won't work with the chassis systems if you drop your 1022 build into it, because the chassis usually have a little metal piece that follows the trigger guard a little bit, especially if they take AR-15 pattern grips. So I made sure I purchased the short version here so it stops short of that and I don't have any interference issues with the magazine release. But this seems really nice. It is milled from aluminum. Actually, now that I mentioned that, I also forgot to mention that the receiver here, another big feature of it is that it's made from 70-75 series aluminum, where most other aftermarket 1022 receivers are the more common 60-61 aluminum. So this is supposed to be a lot stronger and give you a little bit more durability in the Tough 22 receiver from Delask. All right, going on, I also did purchase another kid spring set just in case I need extras, but these are the same springs as these guys. Basically, it comes with 3 different weight springs so you can tune your bolt as it reciprocates under recoil. This is an auto bolt release, very common upgrade part for your 1022. You can also do it yourself, of course. It's quite easy. Now, a standard 1022, for those of you who don't know, when you go to close the bolt, you can't just let it come forward because you need to manipulate the bolt release in a way to let it clear the bolt, which is kind of a safety issue, which is built into it. I really don't mind because I let a lot of new shooters that I bring with the range to me shoot this gun. So it's kind of an extra safety feature. And since the 1022s are often bought by parents for kids or newer shooters, of course, I don't really have an issue with that. But as you can see, the factory version doesn't have the auto bolt release. You do have to manipulate that with either your other hand or another finger. But this one here, you can just pull the bolt back and it'll come forward. I got some small parts here just for some upkeep and new firing pin and firing pin springs, as well as extractors, but I also do have some takedown screws. And finally, the heart of the build, if you will, is the bolt. This one is from Kid. This is kind of their standard bolt. Let me just open this up here. So this is basically just their standard bolt, but it is supposed to be machined with really high tolerances, and it also does have a pinned firing pin, as you can see there. So it prevents the firing pin from traveling upwards, and it just has a straight back and forth travel through the bolt, which is pretty cool. So the Kid bolt is supposed to be pretty nice, and it should run perfectly fine in the Delask receiver. I'm going to go ahead and put all these parts together to make my complete barreled action, of course. I can't show it on video, unfortunately, but with the magic of editing, I will be right back. And we're back. So here is the assembled 1022 in the Delask Tough 22 receiver. While I was building it, I realized I forgot to mention a few key things about certain components that are really interesting. So starting on the Tough 22 receiver, this does have the rear cleaning port, this little hole drilled into the back of the receiver here. This allows you to take the bolt out and allow you to clean the barrel from rear to front, as you usually would with like a precision type rifle. Honestly, in 1022s, I find that a bore snake is just the easiest way to go, because obviously you don't have to disassemble the whole thing in order to use a cleaning rod, but that is a feature for sure. The trigger pack here from Ruger, the BX trigger, was a pretty tight fit into the receiver. I'm not sure if that's because of the tolerances of the trigger or the receiver, or perhaps both, but I actually really like that. In my other 1022, it's a really loose fit and the trigger pack just falls out basically. Same with the pins. All these holes that hold the pins and this buffer are really nice and tight. Not to the point where it's hard to get out, but they just fit the pins a lot better. I also failed to mention before that the buffer I'm using for the bolt stop is another part from Kid. I have an extra one here. It's kind of like a deep blue color, but it's actually a nylon material, I believe, like a hard plastic, as opposed to the regular steel pin. So it's supposed to kind of dampen the recoil a little bit. I ended up placing the regular weight spring in the rifle for now, because I just want to see if it will cycle. Generally speaking, I think the rule of thumb is you want the heaviest spring in the rifle that will cycle properly for the given type of ammunition that you're going to shoot. So I'm going to try this, but if it doesn't cycle quite properly, I'll throw in the lightweight spring later on. Going to the barrel here from Delask, again, this is the 12.5-inch barrel, heavy profile. The first thing you may notice here is the muzzle device I put on. This is the True North Arms mini brake, and it doesn't sit flush with the barrel, as you can see there. There's a small gap, and that's because the threads on this barrel are really quite long. And I noticed that a little bit before I started assembling the gun, but you can just see the amount of threads here is pretty substantial. Probably about, just shy of 3/4 of an inch just going off my mat here and the 1/2-inch grid. But that really is quite long. I mean, I do have quite a few barrels that are threaded for 1/2 inch by 28, and I've never seen one with so many threads exposed. Granted, they are all ARs, but this one, again, was a little interesting. So I'm probably going to get a spacer so I can still use this muzzle device and not have a gap there. But for now, I'm just going to keep this on here to protect the crown of the muzzle. The barrel fit into the receiver was extremely tight, as is very common for these 1022 builds. A lot of the high-end parts have really tight tolerances between the barrel, that shank that goes into the receiver. Fortunately, I didn't need to heat or cool the material. A lot of people will recommend putting the barrel in the freezer, or in my case, since outside is now sub-zero, I could just leave it outside, and then heating up the receiver quickly before you try and mate the two parts together. Luckily, I didn't have to do that. The back of the barrel Let me see if I can actually show this on camera. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but the rear of the barrel there on that face is actually tapered slightly, which helps guide it into the receiver. And I just ended up using a mallet to kind of mate the two halves together. I used this wood block. I just drilled a small hole in there so I wouldn't damage the front. And I placed the threads in there and then used a mallet on the back side of the receiver, which worked out pretty well. Now, the thing you have to be really careful with, obviously, is indexing the barrel properly, because you do have to line up the flat notch on the bottom for the V-block, as well as the cutout. I'm not sure how well I can see that, but there's a little cutout in the barrel face there for the extractor to line up with. Luckily, I did not have to readjust the barrel once it was seated. I managed to index it very carefully on the way in. So that's probably going to stay there. It's going to be a total nightmare if I ever have to remove this barrel, but that was that. So 12.5-inch barrel installed. Another thing that I thought was kind of funny while I was putting this together was I realized I forgot to order these pins, these 2 pins here and here holding the trigger pack. And I was assuming the trigger pack would come with them, but it did not. So I actually stole these off my other 1022, and I'll have to order myself some of these pins. But again, the trigger pack fit to the receiver was nice and tight, and the pins also fit really nicely. The extended magazine release here, again, this is an aluminum piece from Delask, and I didn't notice, but it actually has an extension here for the bolt release, which is actually really cool as well. So the bolt release, when I want to actuate it, I can press this button here, which you can see is quite a bit extended from the usual piece that is that stainless color a little bit higher up. So that's pretty cool. It's both a magazine release as well as an extension for your bolt hold open. And as you can see, I do have the auto bolt release installed as well. The original bolt release was this guy right here, and the auto bolt release is silver. So now, instead of having to manipulate both the bolt handle and that little tab in order to close the bolt, I can simply just pull back on the bolt handle and let it come forward, which is pretty cool. So again, this is the assembled barreled action so far. Again, obviously I haven't shot it, so this is going to be the setup I'm using. Looking at it right now, again, this might just become a fun little blaster. I'm not sure if this is going to be my build for the X22 series that I mentioned, but we're going to do quite a bit of testing. So in the next video, I'm going to throw this in a stock for the meantime as I wait for the Grey Birch Solutions chassis to come out, just so I can run some reliability tests and hopefully test some accuracy as well. Now, my 1022 stock does not fit a heavy barrel profile, unfortunately. The channel for the barrel is cut for the tapered standard 1022 barrel. So what I did was I actually cut one in order to accept this. So let me take out this action screw here so I can show you. It looks pretty funny and it's kind of strange looking, but the Hogue stock that I had my 1022 in, I'm not touching because that's quite a nice stock for the factory 1022, but I still had the factory stock kicking around, and I just chopped off the fore end of it so that the barrel channel can, well, it's non-existent, so I can put my heavy barrel in there. So it's gonna look pretty funny, but let's drop this guy in here and see how it looks. All right, so I have it installed in the factory stock. It looks completely ridiculous, but this is the only way I can fit the heavy barrel profile into anything. So this is going to be my test platform when I bring it out to the range for the first time. Again, really stupid looking, but this is as good as it's gonna get for now. Also, as far as the magazines are concerned, the extended release does work really nicely. Gun is clear, of course. The magazines sit nice and flush, and they do fall free with that extended mag release. So that's really cool. If you want to see the tri-mag coupler, I'll throw these mags on here right now. And here it is. So it's pretty neat. Again, it just holds all your mags in this kind of triangle formation, which makes your reloads really straightforward because you don't have to grab anything. You just rotate to the next mag and insert into the rifle. So pretty cool. I'm excited to try this out. The build looks really cool. I do really like the tough receiver from Delask. I think it looks really nice. And again, I really like that extended Picatinny rail at the top there. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video and take care.